what we're talking about when we're looking at all of this is kind of two ways that we can approach word study. One is what the curriculum's actually telling us that we need to do. And it doesn't give us word families, but it does give us affixes to explore. And it does talk about, we need to talk about words that come from different origins, that were influenced by different groups, technology, et cetera, et cetera. So you can frame your thinking this way. What concepts am I expected and my students are ready to explore in this grade? So this link here will take you to that PDF that I have, and I've shared it before here, of the morphology concepts that are pulled out of the curriculum from the vocab and the conventions. And while I'm talking, I'm realizing I did not share my slide deck with you all right now. So that's one way that we can look at it, is what are we expected to teach and what are my kiddos ready to teach? So the average grade 6 student is not ready to explore the concepts as written in the curriculum. They need to go back far enough to understand some of the more essential or basic morphemes or affixes that we work with: ing, ed, plural, er as a comparative, er as an agent noun, est. Okay, so that doesn't mean you have to spend like forever and a day on it with your older students. It's just calling attention to how the system of English spelling. Then you can, zoom up or speed up in that complexity piece. And then the next question you ask yourself is, what are the texts I can use to introduce these words? So there's times where there's absolutely a certain word list. There's a certain word list that, there's a certain word that you want to explore, a word family. Like I'd like to explore the SIGN sign family because it does a lot of stuff. And so then I would go in search of a text that has that word in it. There's other times, though, that it doesn't matter what the base is. I'm focusing on like ing, or I'm focusing on est. So I'm going to look for a text that uses that particular suffix a lot so that we can talk about it. How is it being used? Alternatively, and this is what we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about today, is what are some of the words that we could explore orthographically to help students build deeper understanding of a concept I'll be teaching? In other words, how can we use word study in other subject areas? We can explore which words share the base, and we can talk about the affixes and how they might change the meaning or sense of the base. One thing I'm learning as I'm doing this work is how when you get into the world of bound bases, it really is about the sense of the word in order to make the connections within the family, as opposed to like the hard and fast definition. So there's some flexibility, if you will, in stretching how the sense of this thing goes here. It's not always as clear cut as EX means out and IT means go, and when we exit, we go out. It's not always that linear. And so it's really about understanding this meaning or sense thing as we get into bound base words. So here's one for us. Let's look at the word fraction. What is the base of the word fraction? If you know, you can write it in the chat box. You don't have to. This isn't a skill testing activity for you. Okay, we have a couple of hypotheses here, F-R-A-C-T or F-R-A-C. Remember, when you build out your word sum hypothesis and what it might be, you have to then look and see, are there other words that would use that particular morpheme? And so if we can't think of other words that use that particular morpheme, then then it can't be it. Okay. So the base of this word is F-R-A-C-T, fract, meaning to break. Now, Lori, that's awesome. At some point, you'll learn that some of us we've learned about word parts, and then we break words into the tiniest bits ever. Lana used to do this quite a bit. And I'd say, no, that doesn't put the parts back together. It doesn't need to be teeny tiny. So fract is the base. Some people may take the T off of fract and put it on the ION. Here's the deal, folks. If you haven't heard me say this yet, this is one for the record here. ION is the suffix. TION and SION are not suffixes. The T or the S, if you see them, has come from somewhere else. So in this case, the TION that we're seeing in that final syllable, the T has come from the base FRACT. So TION and SION are syllables. They are not suffixes. And yes, I have written to the people to tell them that they might have errors in their very popular program. So don't panic, and you will find things. You will find commercially available resources that list ION, TION, SION, ATION as a suffix, and that it's just, no, it's not it. Because what's happened is, if that's the case, then the base, whatever is left, would have to exist in other words. And that's just not how morphology works. We don't break up morphemes that way. So when I look at fraction, and if I know FRACT is the base, what are some other words that are in the word family? Fracture, fractal. So this is what's got me started on this. I was in a session with my colleague and she was talking about fractions. Then following the next day, because while I was washing my hair, I do great thinking while I'm washing my hair. And I had this moment where I was like, fraction and fracture have to be in the same family. How might it help a student to know that how we're breaking apart parts of a whole in fractioning in math is similar to that time I fell off the playground and broke my arm, and instead of one arm bone, I was left with pieces of arm bone. Is that going to be the thing that, solves all of the mathematical confusion for everyone? No. But that conversation might be enough for a couple of the kiddos to just remember it. It's a piece of background knowledge that they can hang their new thinking on. I honestly wouldn't have thought of infraction, as in breaking a rule, to be related with fraction, even though they're very clearly related. And when we're talking about when light refracts and it's breaking apart, anyways, I just think it's a super fun word that you could explore with your students to maybe build some greater understanding. All right, here's another math example. This one I added at the last minute because my son asked me yesterday, Mom, how do I spell diagonal? And I had this moment, a brain fart is really what it was. I was like, I got the first part, and then I was like, I'm not sure. Had to look it up, which then got me thinking, what is the base of this particular word? Or the other way you can think about this, folks, is what are the morphemes in the word? So if we look at the beginning, look at the front, can we see any morphemes that we recognize? Look at the back, are there any suffixes? So look at the front, are there any prefixes we recognize? Look at the back, are there any suffixes we recognize? And then what's left? in the middle. So DIA in this case is a prefix. GON is the base, meaning angle or corner. Now, the test is, can I think of other words where DIA is used as a morpheme? Diameter, diagram, dialogue. Because when you're having a conversation with someone, you're speaking across or speaking to them. So this is another example of where once you dig out the word parts, once you look at the morphemes, the word sums, you can take this conversation into any direction you want. We could fall down the rabbit hole of other words that have DIA in them. I could also look at GON. What are the other words that are in the word family? I could also say, what other words do we know that use AL as a suffix? What is it doing? And that could be a whole other conversation that we have. So if you know that GON means angle or corner, what are some other words that are in this word family? Polygon. Poly meaning many, gon meaning angles or corners. Here are some other ones. Trigonometry. Octagon, hexagon, heptagon, pentagon, decagon. There's a pattern here. And so you can see maybe, like I personally have never connected diagonal with the other gons that we study, the other shapes. I never thought to have that connection or conversation. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Remember, you can stop and ask questions at any time there, folks. All right, here's another example. I picked out the word investigation for science. It's a verb that's prolific in the new curriculum. So if you had to guess what this word sum might be or what the base of this word might be, are there any guesses? Alternatively, do you recognize any affixes? So we have IN as a prefix, ION as a suffix. Now, just as an aside, when you see ATION, what you're actually seeing is ATE plus ION. The I, because it's a vowel suffix, replaces that single final non-syllabic E of the ATE, and you end up with ATION. So whatever you see ATION, unless we're talking about the word nation, we're talking about two suffixes that are making that. So here we have IN as a prefix meaning in or into. Vestige, it's an old word. Vestige is an old word, meaning to track or to trace. And then we have ATE and ION. Now, once you've got this information, and like, let's say I thought that VEST was really, this is about doing some thinking, taking what I know, fleshing it out. And then you go to the online dictionary and you look up the word investigate. Or investigation, I think is what I had. Okay, so then it has IN meaning into, and then vestigare meaning to track or to trace. Then I can go here and see it even says see vestige, which I didn't even like, it's a word that I probably have read in some sort of like historical fiction, but clearly not part of my everyday vernacular. So first attested in the 1600s, vestige, meaning mark, trace, or sign. So that gives me a base. There it is, right there. Now, investigible, like I have never heard that word. Maybe you have. So as we build out the word family, we, find words that we might not know. If I don't know the word, I don't include it in my list. Or I extend my knowing and I add it, not that you would ever use that word. Now, interestingly enough, there isn't a lot of words aside from those really odd ones that I just showed you that are in this family. So if I was doing this with students, I would connect the words investigating, investigates, investigate, or. Now, we have an example here of or acting as a agent suffix, making an agent noun, someone who. So I could veer and have a conversation about how sometimes we use or, sometimes we use ar, sometimes we use er to talk about someone who does something. Now, I think it's also important to talk about words that aren't in the family, especially because we just want to dispel any confusions that might come up. And so the word invest is not in this family, even though that might be where you first went. But because we know vestige is the base, then it can't be invest, because where did the ige go? Because it's not a suffix. All right. Oh, there we go. My animations are broken. Okay, so when we look at the word suffix and prefix, what is the base they both share? Fix. So SUF is an assimilated form of SUB, meaning under, up from under. How assimilated prefixes work is, think of them like chameleons almost, but they can change their spelling, their structure, depending on the base they're attached to. If you said the word subfix 5 times fast, you eventually get to the word suffix. And so all an assimilated prefix is acknowledging that we need to make a little bit of an adjustment in our spelling because of when we say it. That's what happens. It's a phonology connection. And then we have FIX, meaning fasten or fix. Pre, meaning before, to fasten or fix, prefix. Then we say, obviously, what other words are in the family. So we see affix, fixate. There's that ate as a suffix all by itself. Fixes, you could have a conversation about when we use s and when we use es to make plurals. Transfixed, fixation, fixed. This is one I thought was super interesting. The word fixture is not in the word family. And you're probably saying to yourself, what? Because what happened was the word mix, mix, actually has a twin base that allows it to be mixt to form out the word mixture. So they're twin bases, they're related, but they have 2 different structures. When the people were making decisions about spelling and how we spell things, they said, well, we already have this mixture word. Why don't we just spell fixture the same way? So if I look up the word fixture here, It originally was spelled Fixure. It's built on the model of mixture, in like without logic, without the rules of etymology informing it. And so, yeah, at one point it was fixture, I don't know. And then it became fixture over once they decided to spell it like mixture. But because we can't take it apart, as TURE is a suffix, then it can't live in the family. It can't live in the house. It can maybe live in the garage. Or it can live on the property, but in its own little shed. Okay. However, you need to extend that analogy to work with your students, but I thought that was a really interesting tidbit for that particular word. I've developed a fun little activity that I want to tell you guys about, and I'm sure I've lost it. So anyways, you could do this two ways. You could do it as a small group or whole class activity called How Are They Related? Or you could do it as a partner matching activity called Find Your Relative. So if you're doing this as a whole class, I'll show you what this could look like. But if you're doing it with a group of students, you basically have on it little index cards, words that are in the same family. If you want groups of 3, put 3 words that are in the family. If you want groups of 2, 2 words. Hand them all out. And then in order to find their partner that they're working with, they have to find someone that's in the family with them. So I could have diagonal and trigonometry on 2 cards, and they would need to find each other to identify that GON is the base there. So what's the base? What are the word sums? And then what other words are in the family? Of course, students might need access to the online etymology dictionary. And when I did this with a group of teachers a few weeks ago, any of the time, like once most people had found their family members, and there's a few people that hadn't quite got there yet, you know, I'd say, oh, you need to go talk to that person. I think that's your relative, just to nudge them in the right direction. Now, with a whole class activity, it could look something like this. I'm going to put ungrateful and congratulate up on the board. How are they related? It's just another way of asking, how are they built? Or what is the base that these two share? So we have GRATE over here in ungrateful. We see the whole base there. We don't see it here because the ULE has bumped out that final non-syllabic E here from GRATE. How we know that it is GRATE and not GRAT is because if we added a vowel suffix to it, we would have had to double that final consonant, and that's not how we spell the word. So the E is there to prevent that from happening when we've added some things. So GRATE is interesting because it's an example of a homographic base that we get from Latin. We have lots of them. But GRATE, the spelling, actually has 3 different meanings or senses. So here we have to give thanks or show joy. We also have like grating cheese. And then we have like the holes in the drain where the water runs through, the grate in the ground. So 3 different meanings, same spelling. We just blame the Latin. So anyways, once they find their partner, they write the word sums, they double check to make sure they're on the right track, and then they brainstorm the other words that are in the word family. So here is my challenge to you, folks and friends, that as you're working in another subject area in your classroom, or maybe even it's a tier 2 word in language arts, what's a word that you could explore orthographically to deepen that understanding? Now, is it appropriate to do this with grade 1 students? Probably not. But definitely older students, and definitely is helpful heading into like middle school, high school, as we build up more content area language.